Well, Pilsen, Pilsen is a home for me. I don't live in Pilsen any longer, but I lived there. I grew up there for a long time. I was an artist there for a long time. And I'm talking about Pilsen, the actual borough of Pilsen, and I'm also talking about an adjacent place called Little Village, which at some point they border. So I like to talk about Marshall Boulevard for some time. Marshall Boulevard is on the edge of Cermak. It's literally on Cermak, an edge of Cermak, and it's kind of a merging space between both of those boroughs. Now, what I want to bring out first, and first most, is you got to understand something. These are culturally artistic boroughs. As a matter of fact, they are the main proprietors for the art district on the south side of Chicago, and that's something to be proud about for people who are artistically, oriented, and not only just artistically oriented, but they themselves are trying to make the neighborhood better. So you can see efforts made by the residents therein to make the neighborhood better. How do we know this is happening? Because there's always some type of program or collective in Pilsen and Little Village which is solely aimed at betterment of the neighborhood. They exist. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm very well in tune with MacArthur Foundation, which funds quite a few programs aimed in those neighborhoods. So what my point is that the residents themselves that live in those neighborhoods are trying very hard with the resources that they have to fix those neighborhoods. Now, why is this so important to bring up when I'm talking about gentrification? Because they are the enemy to gentrification, and it's a David and Goliath battle. Well, guess who David is and guess who Goliath is? Well, Goliath is the collective of people, housing developers, aldermen, landowners, who are the actual collective of the gentrification monster, the gentrification machine. Now, there's two sides to gentrification. One is the imagery of gentrification, and it's a very positive imagery. It makes things look wonderful. They're making bad neighborhoods into Wonderland. I like to use that terminology. They're making bad neighborhoods into Wonderland. Get rid of gang banging. Get rid of the bad apples. Get rid of crime. Get rid of that. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're gonna fund new parks. We're gonna put up water fountains. We're gonna put up coffee shops and clean the streets and police cameras and propagate the police to have more community area policing. Guess what? They are doing that. Yeah, they're doing it. What's so wrong? What's so wrong about that? I'm going to tell you what's wrong about it. Now, the idea is if the intention was to do this for the original neighborhood, the original residents therein, it would be wonderful. It would be graceful. It would be welcomed. And as a ethnic person, I'm a mixed race guy. I'm off from all kind of different racial makeups and nationalities. And you got to understand something. These neighborhoods, especially Pilsen's unique artistic neighborhood, is a melting pot in of itself. It's like a small version of America, but micro-sized down. Because we're taking the best out of every person's background and belief and cultural diversity. And what we're doing as a community is making it stronger. But there's a monster looming over our shoulder. There's a dragon behind us and it wants to burn us alive. How? Why? What does it look like? Well, I'm going to tell you how. And I'm going to tell you who. And then I'm also going to tell you why. So pay attention. First of all, the dragon, the monster that wants to eat you alive, all the people that live in our vicinity of Pilsen, is gentrification. Now, it doesn't look like a monster. The monster is a devil, a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks wonderful. And indeed, they come in with the prospect of building Wonderland. And what is Wonderland? Wonderland is a community that is well endowed, that has all the facets of what a community should be. In other words, it's a safe community. It's a community that envisions and welcomes in people who can do good for its residents. Sounds wonderful, but it doesn't include you. You see, See, that's what it said. It does not include you. It doesn't include the original residents. Well, how do we know this? How do we know it? How do we know I'm not just some kind of conspiracy person or somebody with a beef or somebody has some type of social injustice ideology that just doesn't fit in with the status quo? No, I'm going to tell you how. Let's look at some of the key aspects of gentrification and why it's bad. Well, first of all, they make money off of the displacement of people. Now, I'm going to rewind it again because you really need to understand this. Gentrification and the powers that be, that collective collusion of housing developers, aldermen, and other developers in the community who can not necessarily be housing developers, but can be land developers. That means the construction of parks and so forth. These are the collusion outfit that run the gentrification machine. So now I just told you who they are. Okay, let's look at how they do it. Well, they do it with a very simple tactic. What they do is they take advantage and exploit neighborhoods that are under economic stress. Now let's take a look at this for a minute. Now all neighborhoods, all of them, at some point in time go under economic stresses. This has to do with a lot of things that city and state values are condoned, whether they're good or bad for one area or another. The fact is that most neighborhoods do go under economic stress. Some of those neighborhoods get stuck and they become what are termed problematic or disheveled or dilapidated neighborhoods. Okay, now you see this in every New York, Detroit, Chicago, Florida, Miami. It's a whole place goes on. Okay, the list will go on. But the whole point is it's one continuous common factor that cities have to contend with. Okay, right now Pilsen is being victimized. Now, why is Pilsen being victimized? Well, it's going to follow in the same footsteps as Wicker Park long ago, which is a great neighborhood now. But if you look at Wicker Park, none of its original residents are there. Whoa, what was that? What was that? If you look at Wicker Park, none of its original residents were there. Oh my God. Oh my God, that's right. Okay. Humboldt Park. Here's another one going right under. It's being victimized now. Yeah. We are doomed to suffer the same fate. Now, when I say doom, that doom is only for the original residents of those underlying boroughs. So, you got to understand something. When people come in to actually occupy those neighborhoods, they're not you. What's happening is that the gentrification outfits go and buy buildings and apartments, homes, huge apartments that have many apartments for rent, small homeowners property, and they buy them out. They buy them out because they're under economic stress at the time. And so this is the predatory aspect of gentrification, because gentrification can't happen all the time. It only occurs when those neighborhoods are under economic stress, and it occurs when they're at the worst. That's because the property becomes much cheaper. So if you're a homeowner and you're struggling to keep your building up to city codes, and you're struggling just like everybody else in the community is struggling, and most of the time you find a way out. But if you have a gentrification monster machine that is taking advantage of that time of stress, that time of high economic stress, now you have a catalyst for change. That change is good for people that are outside of your neighborhood, but extremely bad for you, the person that lives in the neighborhood. Now, why is that? Because all of a sudden you find that you are, if you're a renter or a homeowner, you find that you're being highly stressed to sell your property. And if you're a renter, which is most of the population in those boroughs, you will find yourself with a very horrifying reality. What is that reality like? Imagine yourself living with a sister that's pregnant, or your mother undergoing an operation, or you yourself struggling between two jobs and having to raise two kids. Now, I just mentioned very common denominator factors for everybody that lives in these type of economically stressed boroughs. So we all know, we are familiar with these things. Now, if all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and you wipe the sand out of your eyes and you find out that you no longer have the same landlord, you have another landlord, and that landlord is in complete 100% collusion with a gentrification outfit This is a nightmare in reality coming to life, manifesting itself in life. Because now all of a sudden your rent has been hiked up by a huge margin and you can no longer pay that rent. And you could complain to your landlord, hey, I can't afford this. I've been living here for generations underneath, this amount of rent. They don't care. A matter of fact, their very intention is to get rid of the people in that neighborhood, because for those people, they see people like us as the proprietors and creators of the disheveled neighborhood itself. In other words, they think we make the neighborhood bad. Now, if you want to contend that idea, here's a way to do it. First of all, this is not true. The reasons why we can't sometimes take care of our own neighborhoods is because we don't have the financial means to do so. First of all, we're struggling to keep our own personal homes in line financially. But there are happy stories without gentrification. Let me say it again. There are happy stories of neighborhoods without gentrification. Yeah, they're here in Chicago. Now, they're far and few, but they do exist. How did this happen? Because when people get together through activism and they can force people to understand that there is a huge injustice going on in their neighborhoods, what they can do is bring the attention needed to gain municipal tariffs, that's money, and to those communities, so that the communities can better themselves. This does occur and it does happen. Now, this is the actual enemy to gentrification. Gentrification wants the opposite. Gentrification wants to come in, buy the homes they're in, raise the rent so that the original renters can no longer live there, and by your own free will, you have to go. You have to leave because you can't afford the home. Now, they go, well, gee whiz, how convenient for us that these homeowners are leaving of their own free will. Well, they're not leaving of their own free will. What the gentrification does is make us refugees in our own neighborhood. They literally make you leave because you can't afford. So you find yourself leaving with your family, struggling to go to some other neighborhood. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with it is that most of the time you can only afford a neighborhood that's worse than the one you first lived in. Musical chairs, man. Musical chairs. If you remember the game of musical chairs is they play a song, and when that song plays, everybody stands up and dances around the chair, right? Or runs around the chair. When the song ends, everybody has to sit down again. And the problem is that sometimes there's no seat for the person standing up. Who do you think the person standing up is? Who do you think has to end the game? It's us. So when you have a sister, or you have a brother, or you have a friend or a family member who goes, gee whiz, look, they're putting patio chairs out there and a new restaurant and a new coffee shop that they just built. They put up community police cameras. They're funding a new park. Boy, it looks wonderful, and by all means, it is wonderful. But the problem is it's wonderful for other people. It's not wonderful for you. You're not welcomed in Wonderland. Minorities are not welcomed in Wonderland. When gentrification takes place, you're in your home and you see that borderline of development getting closer and closer, and you don't jump out. You don't jump out. It's just like the analogy of the frog in the frying pan. Watch the show one time. They have a frog. Put the frog inside a frying pan, and they fill the frying pan with water, and ever so slowly they raise the temperature, and the water boils. And the frog did not jump out. It died. Why? Because the temperature was raised so slowly to boiling that the frog could not feel the water getting hotter. This is the analogy I use for people who welcome gentrification. They look out their window from across the street. If you're living on Marshall Boulevard, where the old Apollo Theater was, or you're living somewhere within the junction of Pilsen and Little Village, and you look outside the window and you see that development line, does it look like a storm? Does it look like a red hot fire or a wildfire coming your way? It doesn't. It looks the opposite. It looks friendly, but it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Sure, it looks clean. Sure, it looks nice. Sure, it looks beautiful. But it's beautiful and nice for other people, not you. They're making that home. They're making that beauty. They're making those changes for people that are going to displace you and your family. Now, how do we know this? Why is gentrification bad? Look at the very key element. Gentrification and the machine of gentrification benefits by making money from displacing its original residents. They take advantage of economically stressed neighborhoods and communities. That's extremely evil. That's very predatory, especially for poor people who really can't defend themselves against these high-end, high-run mechanics of economic uh, predators. Okay? Once again, you find yourself suddenly not being able to afford to live in a neighborhood, and you have to leave. They force people to become refugees in their own neighborhoods. And so you see the line of development coming, and instead of sounding off the alarm, you have all your friends and your sisters and brothers going, "Oh, gee whiz, I'm so excited! I'm so excited! They're making the neighborhood wonderful. What are you complaining about? Oh, they're getting rid of the gangbangers. Oh, they're putting up this. What are you complaining about? What do you know?" They know something very important. They know that you're going to get booted out of your own neighborhood. You're going to be turned into a refugee from the place that you lived for generations. That's evil. There's a question to be had here about Pilsen in particular because it's unique. Pilsen is a artistic district. You have to ask yourself something. No matter how you see, if you see a trendy coffee shop being constructed in your neighborhood, you got to remember something. That coffee shop is constructed on the sacrifice of some family being thrown out of their home, forcefully so. So don't be so happy about seeing those things go up. There's a price to pay for those things. And the people who pay the price are not the people who are going to move there, but the original residents who were displaced. Know which side that you're on. This is why you see people go welcoming gentrification. They welcome it. Sure, they welcome it because it looks wonderful. They're building Wonderland, remember. They're going to make Wonderland out of your area. That's what they're trying to do to Pilsen. But you're not welcomed in Wonderland. You're not welcomed here. They want you out. And when that line of development comes that you think is so wonderful, and when it hits your block, you'll find out for yourself. Make no mistake about this. Gentrification benefits financially by the exploitation of neighborhoods under stress. And in this case, Pilsen is under stress. Pilsen is being victimized right now. And it will fall victim and die if people don't do something about it. The question is, are there enough artists? Are there enough activists? Are there enough aldermen that are on the up and up, on the right path, to make do, to go and get the funding we need to make our neighborhoods better with municipal tariffs, with money from the city, without gentrification? Can we do it? Or will we fall victim to the evil specter of gentrification? Because it's a terrible enemy to beat. We have to be collective to fight against it. Understand this when I say it to you. Gentrification is bad. It's only good for the people who move in after you've been displaced. When I say they're exploiting neighborhoods and communities, I'm saying they're exploiting you.